you're not speaking, could you please put yourselves on mute? Thank you. Namaskar, Sat Sri Akal, and depending on where you are in the world, good morning or good afternoon. I'm Sharon Jandu, the moderator for this event. Before I formally introduce the proceedings, a few housekeeping rules. The event is being recorded, so please turn off your camera if you do not want to star in the post-event showreel. Please do keep yourselves on mute unless you have been invited to speak. The format is each keynote speaker will be introduced by the chair to contribute for up to 10 minutes. The panel discussion will follow the presentation. I will be monitoring the chat, so please do pop your questions in there and I will direct them to the chair. And now on to the business in hand. Welcome to the official book launch of Social Enterprise in Higher Education Sector, published by Cambridge Scholars Publishing UK. The editors of the book are Dr. Rupinder Oberoi from the Department of Political Science at the University of Delhi, India. Jamie Halsall, reader in Social Sciences at the University of Huddersfield, UK. Michael Snowden, senior lecturer in Mentoring Studies, also at the University of Huddersfield. The publication is an outcome of the UK ERI project examining modifying social entrepreneurship in higher education curriculum, which was jointly sponsored by the British Council and University Grant Commission. In terms of my background, I'm a social entrepreneur, and I had the pleasure of interacting with Dr. Oberoi and her team while she was working on this project in Huddersfield. My social enterprise is based in Huddersfield and has been established to support the most vulnerable in the community. We are currently working on a range of projects from digital inclusion, employability skills, rehabilitating young offenders, to an empowerment programme for sexually exploited women. My social enterprise is driven by my experiences as a serving presiding judge with the West Yorkshire Magistrates. Social enterprise and value-based communities are becoming more of an important feature within society. This edited publication provides a joined-up thinking approach to social enterprise within social sciences by examining theoretical approaches to social enterprise, addressing its influence on wider society and its fundamental importance within the higher education sector. Dr. Oberoi has organised an incredible, actually a magnificent panel for us, who will be introduced in turn by our chair, Professor Kiran Teran. And now to formally introduce our chair and first keynote speaker. Professor Kiran Teran is Pro Vice Chancellor, Partnerships and Engagement and Professor of Entrepreneurship at the University of York and also Director of the Centre for Women's Enterprise, Leadership, Economy and Diversity. In 2019, she was elected to be the President of the Institute for Small Business and Entrepreneurship, which is a leading national body for SME research and policy learning. And more recently, she was invited to be one of the lead commissioners on the West Midlands Leadership Commission to lead a new research and policy agenda on leadership diversity for electoral mayor Andy Street and the West Midlands Combined Authority. The final report was commended by Prime Minister Theresa May and was featured in the Times Higher. Over to you, Professor Teran.
Thank you so much, Sharon, for such a warm welcome. Colleagues, a really warm welcome wherever you are in the world. Today feels very special because today isn't simply for me about a book launch. The book, in itself makes a really important and valuable contribution. It extends our understanding and it extends our reach in terms of the roles of social enterprises, both in higher education and beyond. It helps to kind of illuminate, some of the complexities, but also some of the incredible gifts of social enterprises, and makes a really compelling case for a much more integrated and a nuanced approach to our understanding of social enterprises. So the book launch today, for me, is very special for a number of reasons. One is because it gives visibility and voice to social enterprises. It inspires us to think about education and learning in very different ways. And thirdly, it's a celebration of the work that social enterprises do that often gets overlooked, particularly in the context of policy discussions or in the form of business support. So I'm delighted to be both opening, today's event, but also to have such a rich and diverse set of speakers who are all going to shine a particular light based on their own work in this field. So when people say, oh, isn't it great, there's a new book? Absolutely. But this book is going to make a difference. It's going to make a difference to our students, to our scholars, to practitioners, and to policymakers. That's why an event like this is so important. It allows us to come together to really think about how do we extend that reach of social enterprises? What kinds of contribution do they make? And how do we make those more visible? And we often kind of learn a lot from policy learning and from large firms. And I want to turn the tables today and say, what might we learn from social enterprises? And so the theme of my talk for the next 10 minutes or so is going to be about social enterprises as a vehicle for opening up diversity and inclusion. And I want to have a look at the role that social enterprises play in promoting social inclusion amongst disadvantaged groups. And why that particular focus? Because if we look at the economies across the world and how social enterprises evolve, get developed, often they're out of economic necessity. In the past, people haven't had choices and they haven't been able to feed their way into kind of mainstream employment. But I want to move away from this deficit, debate to show the thoughtful contribution that young people, women, and people from disadvantaged backgrounds do and make in creating new enterprises, and how the term social inclusion in itself, aligns itself really well within the context of social enterprises. So what I want to do is to illuminate the ways in which social enterprises have demonstrated both an openness and a willingness to embrace diversity agendas, which often suppress that of for-profit organisations. And then I finally want to finish by arguing and addressing the gap that in relation to inclusion around future work, which in many ways, so many of the chapters in the book do, they shine a really important light. You don't need me to tell you that social enterprises have an explicitly social aim, but that value and that mission that seeks to benefit the community through the activities they do is really, really important, because social enterprises can and often are large, they're innovative, and they operate in diverse sectors of the economy. And if I just give you some stats, based in the context of the UK, in the UK, there are over 100,000 social enterprises. They comprise 3% of the GDP, which is 60 billion, and they employ over 2 million people. This sector is 3 times larger than agriculture and provides as many jobs as the creative industry. The history of social enterprises, though, stretches back over 200 years, with roots in workers' cooperatives, voluntary associations, mutual societies, and charitable sort of foundations. And many of the chapters in the book highlight that value, that social mission. But that social mission also has a contribution to make, as I've just shown, to the economy, to the communities these businesses reside in. COVID-19 has highlighted some of those inequalities, but what they've also shown is how social enterprises have been the one thing that's remained constant. Not only have they managed to survive, they've also thrived and created jobs and sustained jobs in the communities. So social enterprises have undergone an incredible, significant growth, both in terms of scale and policy attention, varying in terms of, different definitions of what constitutes social enterprises, which I'm not going to address today. But in liberal market economies, such as Australia and the United States, there's a greater emphasis on social enterprises as market orientated, in contrast to European countries, which give greater emphasis to social enterprises having organisational structures that empower the very people that work with them and for them. So much more democratic forms of operating. So in the UK, the social enterprise sector is both strong and dynamic, you know. But what that does mean then is they tend to be disproportionately located in much smaller SMEs with slightly smaller turnovers. But is that problematic? And I'm going to make a case for not, because if we look at the contribution they make to creating jobs, then that's really, really critical and sustaining, you know, communities and economies. There's also a much stronger focus amongst social enterprises on empowering disadvantaged groups. And the term disadvantage is contested in itself. And so for some groups included in the term, there's very little research on how they relate in the context of social enterprises. But it's genuinely agreed that refugees and migrants are disadvantaged groups, and they might also include the unemployed. But in a review of some of the research that we've been doing around social enterprises, we've also highlighted how they create work opportunities in the context of these disadvantaged groups. So how do social enterprises support diversity and inclusion? I'm going to make a really strong case that social enterprises have proven to be important in mitigating against social inclusion through their commitment to social goals and the diversity of leadership in this sector. A lot of my research is focused on leadership, you know, within SMEs and in social enterprises. Social enterprise leadership means that they create really positive role models and they demonstrate the capacity for the sector both to empower but also to create more equal workplaces. And to just give you, you know, some sort of kind of figures and examples of that, social enterprise leadership and teams within them, 89% of them are made up of females, against 20% in commercially led SMEs. And if you look at the major characteristics of social enterprises in the creation of work opportunities, you know, for disadvantaged groups who might otherwise be included, they take up a much larger percentage. They facilitate employment opportunities, you know, in the context of gender, ethnicity, and disability. And these are really, really important. But that doesn't mean to say there aren't gaps within the context of the evidence. The social enterprise sector in the UK is notably more diverse than for not-profit sector businesses. For example, half of the social enterprise startups are led by women and 21% have BAME leaders. But they are likely to be located in areas of deprivation, with 27% based in the poorest areas of the UK. So not only are social enterprises more likely to be led by non-traditional demographics, social enterprises also employ their staff from the local region. And so it's really important that we look at the benefits of inclusion and diversity, because it's within these contexts, in terms of community and place, which is so, so critical. So while the success of social enterprises in championing diversity are absolutely manifest in the last few years, we need to do more. We need to challenge our social enterprise community when it comes to raising the visibility of the work that they do. And so in drawing up some of my findings and concluding reflections, the evidence illuminates that further research on the role of social enterprises in fostering social inclusion is vital. And that's why the book launch and the chapters in the book are so, so important, because they start from the premise of education. They start from the premise of using our schools, our colleges and our universities, creating an enterprising culture, an enterprising for all mindset. And so we've also got to think about social enterprises as careers of choices. And how can the smaller gender gap in social enterprises, you know, be explained? We've looked at research around disability and agency in relation to this. And so if we're going to continue to both make a difference and a measurable difference in the context of social enterprises, we have to have a commitment to a social mission that could be scaled up or transmitted to commercial enterprises. There's a huge potential for social change that is bottom up rather than top down. And so I'm making a case for social enterprises in terms of diversity and inclusion and making social enterprises everybody's business. That's why today's event is so important, both a celebration and acknowledgement of the powerful work that takes place in this area, but also a challenge and a propagation to the debate from the varying, different insights that we're going to have from our speakers today. So without further ado, I'd like to say a huge thank you to the organisers for organising the event, which is so, so important. And then introduce our second keynote speaker, who's going to look at, in the context of the book, but a particular aspect of social enterprise. And colleagues, could I encourage you to, the panel debate is going to be vibrant and hopefully, it will come alive. We want to talk about your lived experience of this. This isn't a sell and tell kind of event. This is an event that we want you to be part of and engage with. So I'm asking all of our speakers to kind of stay within the context of their sort of 8 to 10 minutes. And I know we have so much that we want to say that often that isn't enough. But today is about laying the foundations. Let's have a fruitful and productive debate that helps shape both future research thinking and policy change in this area. So I'm delighted to introduce our next speaker, Professor Onat Pandit, and you have his biographical details in your packs. So without further ado, a warm welcome, Professor.
Thank you, Professor Trehan, for introducing me. And I would like to pay my warm welcome to all the panelists and the speakers for this event. I'm feeling delighted that we are brainstorming on a most painstaking area where entire world need the transformation. While we are trying to address the sustainable development goals, the UN has offered this goal to all the world, entire world, and we have been thrown a challenge how we are going to address all those issues. And in my opinion, social enterprise has the power to address all these SDGs. UN has given these goals, but still the entire process, mechanism, and system is yet to get evolved. Everybody is trying to achieve these goals, but without the involvement of a social enterprise, it is going to be difficult to achieve them. Even if we take few goals like no poverty or zero hunger, without the grassroots level work being done on all these issues, it is not going to give a proper solution on addressing them. I'm working on this area, and wherein I am firmly believing, based on my experience, that if we want to achieve a tangible outcome, then it is high time to create the enterprises which are social enterprises in nature and are working on a micro cooperative moment wherein they are going to manage their operation costs, they are going to run their activities on a grassroots level, and at a right painstaking area, they are going to address the challenges. Now, for this kind of a social enterprises, they are in need of technology, innovation, and connectivity. I think these are the three major key which is going to help them in addressing the grassroots issues. Same way on health issues. India at one point in time, in some part of the country, were badly affected because of the malnutrition. And specifically, I would like to refer here the coastal part of Maharashtra, where the malnutrition was resulting into the high mortality rate. Here, in this part, various social enterprises got involved, and they have right at the front end, they have started offering these innovative solutions. Innovative solutions in terms of a nutritious cake, which is going to take care of the minerals, vitamins, essential need of a caring mother during the conceiving period. Nutritious cake, even post-pregnancy, is going to offer to this mother. And for each of this phase of a caring or conceiving period and post-pregnancy, also till certain period of time, even to the child, various kinds of a nutritious cake they have prepared and they have started offering. And in less than 3 years of a time, the mortality rate, which was up to around 20-25%, was drastically brought down to less than 1.5%. This kind of a transformation can only happen if social enterprises are committed towards delivering the need on a grassroots level. On education front also, India has brought the national education policy wherein the skill sector or building the skill and sensible awareness on the social issues is going to get addressed. Various other factors on SDGs will also require the different approach. And in my opinion, to view the challenges thrown out of these 17 SDGs, it's a high time that we look social enterprise from a different perspective. We offer them the environment wherein they can sustain their operations. They can manage their show on grassroots level. They offer the cutting-edge technology innovation which is required on the site. Even on a biodiversity, climate change, environmental issues, these are going to be panic day by day if we are not going to sensitize the humanity on managing this. I think it is going to be a difficult phase. And only social enterprise which has some sensible goals and are sensitive enough to deliver on ground, that is something which will result into the tangible outcome. In my opinion, it's a high time for UN also to bring the process, mechanism and impact creation, and some white paper is required to brought in how this SDGs can be achieved with the help of social enterprises and how the countries are going to run certain programs through which these SDGs can be achieved. In India, There are certain agencies, governmental agencies who are running the program. I would like to name one or two. Atal Innovation Mission is one of such agency who has run a program to build the entire bottom line network connectivity by offering the programs like Atal Incubation Center, Atal Community Innovation Center, some certain program called Atmanirbhar Bharat Arise Initiative. These kind of initiatives are addressing the grassroots challenges which humanity is facing, and how the innovative solution, technology intervention can address those challenges. One of such challenges was there on getting the groundwater utilized for the agri farming. And one such startup named Khetwork, MIT graduates designed a solar water submersible pump which is working on a two-stroke pumping, was offered to the Pune and nearby area where they are severely affected because of a drought and they don't have a power connectivity. And this startup has offered a wonderful solution. And now in this region, the farmers are taking at least minimum 2 crops. So this has not just increased their income or revenue generation, but this has also resulted into some innovative solution which is deployed for the societal cause, and livelihood got improved. And this is called the impact of a social transformation through technology and innovation. And with this, I would like to take a pause because I have completed my allotted time. But this kind of a brainstorming will certainly create an impact, and a book coming out on social enterprises in the higher education sector will certainly bring the change and offer a new standing position how the social enterprises can be looked at a higher education level. Students may need to nurture towards adopting the best practices and exploring the student startup in social sector. And that would be the transformative action which may result out of this event. Thank you very much. Namaste.
Thank you so much, Professor Panda. For a really engaging and insightful presentation, I want to pick up on 2 things that we will elaborate on during the kind of questions and discussions. You talk so compellingly about transformation and change, but not in the context of simple outcomes, but also in the context of impact and UN Sustainable Goals. And I think the provocation to the debate that you have given us is a really important, critical one, which is we need to work on issues of social and economic importance that are actually going to have a real impact and effect in the context of the communities that these enterprises are located in. And I was really struck by the lovely concrete example that you gave us about it isn't just simply about sustainability or climate change. It's also about poverty alleviation and giving equity and rights to everybody to have those life chances, and in many ways there is synergies and links to my opening presentation. So it's really lovely. You never quite know what the speakers are going to say, and we haven't spoken before, but me opening up with the importance of inclusion and not just focusing on diversity, but creating inclusive societies, inclusive cultures, inclusive economies, so that we have what I call inclusive growth. So thank you so much, because the strands and the threads of what you've articulated, are some of the debates that the book is having, but also I know builds on the kind of speakers that we have to follow. So a huge thank you. Colleagues, let me move on then to our next speaker, and I'm delighted to introduce you to Suresh Krishna, who's the co-founder and MD and CEO at Yunus Social Business Fund in India. A warm welcome. Over to you for your 8-minute presentation.
Thanks, Kiran. And hello to everyone. And thanks for this opportunity to be part of this group of this launch of this book today. I've not read the book much. I'm looking forward to read that book soon because the title itself was very inspiring. That's what I thought I should also try and contribute to what we have been doing. We at Yunus Social Business, I'll take a couple of minutes to just tell you what we do, what we are about. Yunus Social Business is co-founded by the Nobel laureate, Professor Muhammad Yunus, from Bangladesh. It was headquartered in Berlin, which is called Yunus Social Business. The idea of Yunus Social Business is how do we solve social problems using business solutions? As you know, Professor Yunus actually started off with microcredit program, providing tiny amounts of credit to women in the rural or the below poverty line across Bangladesh, and which was replicated across many parts of the world. And that led to him getting a Nobel Prize for that. Both Grameen Bank and Professor Yunus got it. So as he was working, I think we all realized that credit is very important, but that's not enough to look at complete development. And that's how we, in fact, Yunus started off looking at various other interventions to see how social change can be done. So he landed up building a wide range of enterprises, which ranges from whether it is healthcare to seeds to energy and telecom and so on and forth. So that's what Yunus Social Business is. How come he started off later. The objective for us is to identify those businesses which are solving social problems. So what we look for or what we support is we provide support in terms of capital to those businesses or social enterprises which are looking at solving social problems using business solutions. That's the premise. So this premise starts off for us from his book called 3 Zeros, The World of 3 Zeros, which talks about zero unemployment, zero poverty, and zero net carbon emissions. So one of the biggest challenges which we find in this world, why the world is unequal or we have so many social issues, is also because we either people are unemployed or underemployed, which results in poverty and which results in bad health and then goes back to poverty again. So if solving social problems, we need to have enterprises which are looking at solving problems. So there are different kinds of enterprises, like most of you know. One is you have enterprises which are charitable in nature, which kind of reaches out to very vulnerable sectors and communities at remote places where they really require some charity dollars to flowing there. But large section of the population are there where they use business solutions. So what we believe in Yunus Social Business is looking at solving these social problems using business solutions. So for me, when we are talking about social enterprises, I think there is a need to clarify what we define social enterprise as. Are we talking about social enterprises as charitable institutions which are in non-profits, NGO-based kind of activity? Or are we looking at business models which is an enterprise models or business models where it is looking at solving social businesses? So we have been defining social businesses like that. These are businesses which are solving social problems. In terms of education, I think we have in fact funded quite a number of education institutions. For fundamental reason is there are a few examples. There's one for Rohan and the other one is Bridge Lab. These companies are looking at getting jobs to people who are already completed their higher education, maybe graduations or undergrads or postgrads. So Bridge Labs, for example, trains engineering graduates because they don't get. These are all students who are passed out from Tier 2, Tier 3 colleges. They have no idea where to get the jobs. So there is a need for a bridging kind of institutions to actually take these educated people and then link them to the industry. So I think the world today and around, the way we all have defined is all education, all businesses are all looked at maximizing wealth. And if you look at all businesses, mostly look at maximizing wealth in terms of they're really not inclusive enough. So social enterprises is what is probably we need to recreate a new system so that we look at inclusivity as a proper goal. So like Eunice always talks about, I think the whole capitalistic world in so many years, I mean, so many almost centuries, have created wonderful things in the society, in the world today. We are enjoying the fruits of all of them. At the same time, it has created a lot of problems. So if to solve those problems, if we use the same old engine to solve that, which created it, it's not going to help. So we need to recreate new kind of enterprises. That's what is social enterprise or social businesses we are talking about. So our efforts is been to look at those kind of social businesses and support them both financially and technically. But there's one challenge here which I always encounter. People who say not many qualified or good people come to work for the social enterprise sector. Usually many people, if you say that I'm working for an NGO or a social enterprise, people think that, okay, you did not get a job in a good company or in a for-profit organization. That's why you're doing some kind of a low-rated job. I think that's a perception which requires change. So I think in our education system as a thing, somewhere we have kind of, probably did not give the value for people working in the social change. There are one sector which people, kind of look up to. If you're working in the government sector, then probably people say if you are a government bureaucrat, you might be still doing social development work, but you are considered okay. But if you work for NGO or social enterprises, you don't get a good value for that. That's a perception change which probably the education system need to bring in. Otherwise, I think we will not get good talent. For me, I've been working in the social development field for all my life, for more than two and a half decades. I've always seen that kind of pushback. And sometimes we feel ashamed to say, okay, I'm working for an NGO doing this thing, because people don't understand what we are doing. They probably think that we did not get good jobs to anywhere else we are doing it. In fact, it's an opposite of it. We have really done well. So enterprises can be sustainable, and the social enterprises can be doing that. That's something which we have to push in the education sector itself. Then people will start valuing it. That's where I'm looking at. I think education, we have seen, I've talked about a little bit of education. In the terms of education, I think if more and more students are coming aware of the social enterprise, and that's another, like I think the earlier speaker was talking about, it's the third largest employer, in fact, as a sector. But unfortunately, the value for people working in the sector is not much. So that's where we need to recreate the value in the social enterprise sector. And also there is a need to define social enterprise properly. That's where, otherwise we might start confusing between the charitable institutions and the business-like institution. I think going forward, we see that business solutions in the social development space is going to be the models. I think COVID has really taught us that in the last 1 year. We have seen a lot of big companies just shed jobs at the drop of a hat because things were not working in their favor. Nobody even given a second thought, what happens to those so many number of people if they are left without jobless. Enterprises all those businesses had the capability to hold them on to. Of course, there are good companies did keep the people, but a lot of companies let go a lot of people out. That's not inclusivity at all. So the world, if we have to have more equitable world, I think we need to have social enterprises out there. So that's what my pitch is. So I'm hoping that this book, like what we are launching on social enterprises, will start inspiring more people, or putting out those success stories, or giving a perspective of how social enterprises can be a real job creators, can work towards social change, can solve problems, at the same time be sustainable. In fact, social enterprises or any social development is not just about some charity work. It's about, for me, according to me, it is similar to building infrastructure in any part of the world. You develop infrastructure, you don't get returns in the next 1 year. It takes tens of years or maybe a few decades before the returns come in. Social development is also something like that. So the people working in the social enterprise sector are people who are building infrastructure. I think that's the kind of message the social enterprise sector or the world across need to start looking at. I'm hoping this book will probably give that perspective and inspire more people to join the social enterprise sector to start solving social problems as they go forward. I also wish more and more publications like this come. This is very good that this book has come up. I look forward to reading it in full once it is released. Thanks.
Great, thank you so much, Suresh. Again, there are a couple of things that I want to pull out that you said, which I think are really insightful and will help us think about the debate that we're going to have as a panel. You talked about changing perception, and you're absolutely right. In order to change perception, I really like the comment that Mark Schofield from Edge Hill University has put in the context in chat. To change perception, we have to kind of think about the curriculum, the education, but also we have to think about how we are retraining parents, because they're such critical players in the context of the choices that young people make. I was also struck about, the theme of inclusivity, which is hardly surprising, is it? COVID-19 across the world has shone a really sharp light about what it means when you have inequality, when you don't have an equal playing field, within that. And the value, and I think what I draw from the really important points that you make is from a practitioner perspective. We can have all the research in the world. If we don't put that research and that evidence to work to affect change, well, then that research, whether it's in a book, whether it's, resides in academic institutions, doesn't do the job that it needs to do. And it's by working hand in hand, with those practitioners. And the third strand that I want to pull, which I thought was, again, really pertinent in your presentation, is the role of role models. I started my presentation about how do you raise the visibility that actually working in or establishing a social enterprise is a career of choice. And it is not a second-rate occupation. And what's really interesting is young people are voting with their feet. Young people are choosing not necessarily to want to work in those large corporations anymore. They want to work in different forms, in different setups, where there is choice and whether there is inclusivity. So thank you so much. Colleagues, I'm giving you the heads up now so it doesn't come as a shock to you. I'm going to ask each of you to think of one question or one reflection. If you could start thinking about those and begin to post them in chat from around about 12:30 onwards, that will allow us to begin to kind of navigate the sorts of panel questions, the panel debate that we have. And in thinking about your questions, think about what's the thing that's perplexing you? What's the thing that is exciting you? And what is the gap that we still haven't addressed? And as a collective of practitioners and scholars around this table, could we be doing to lead, future research and practice agendas? So I'm giving you the heads up now so that you've got a little bit of time to do that thinking. And I'm absolutely delighted. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our next speaker, who is Kate Hainsworth. Kate, a really warm welcome. Kate is CEO from the Leeds Community Foundation and Give at Bradford. And I know about the kind of incredible work that goes on there. So Kate, over to you.
Thank you so much, Kieran. Is it okay if I share my screen? I'm hoping this will work for everybody, because I'm going to do a little bit of a PowerPoint. Can you see my screen? Just a thumbs up from someone. Brilliant. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for giving me a slot today, because it's really exciting to be part and parcel of this, the launch of, as colleagues have mentioned, an extremely thought-provoking and fascinating area of our of our society and global society at that. Delighted to be part of this endeavour. I'm Kate Hainsworth. I'm Chief Exec of a community foundation. So I thought I'd just do a very quick overview of what we do and why I think I've been invited to join you today. So Leeds Community Foundation and the entity we work with called Give Bradford provides basically a means, a vehicle by which we can endeavour very earnestly to provide opportunity for all. Effectively, what that means in practice is we work very closely with philanthropists and donors to raise funds, and it is all about money, and then share that money, distribute that money as equitably and as efficiently as we possibly can to make the change that we're all seeking to achieve, which is that opportunity for all. And so just a quick look at our vision and values there. Just to give you an idea of the scale that we operate on, we're a local organisation. It's not national. We're very much a local geographic footprint. But since we began, we have managed to invest 47 million across Leeds and Bradford in the last financial year. So not the one just finished, but the one before. It was 4.1 million that we distributed. It's actually been quite a lot more in 2020-21 because of the pandemic. But the point I wanted to draw your attention to really was our average grant size, which is, I hope you'll see, pretty small. And really what that means is £5,000 average grant size means that we are really supporting very new entrants into the world of community support. And sometimes that involves individuals, sole workers, sometimes it involves unincorporated organisations, and importantly, it does involve social enterprises. Again, a very quick overview, but our theory of change, or the reason that we, the map we use to check that we're going in the direction that we're hoping to, is really trying to focus on, as you can see, these 4 pillars around people being healthy and well, people and communities thriving and being safe, being able to learn, work and be financially well. And actually also that 4th pillar, which is really important for us, which is about experiencing life, culture, the environment, and being able to play. And so the way that we support those activities is through what we're calling a strengthened community sector. So the grey line in the middle of our theory of change is really absolutely fundamental to our operation, because those are the community organisations, those individuals or those social enterprises that do the work. We're not the ones actually on the ground doing the work. We're investing in those that are doing the work. And the bit behind the scenes at the bottom is what we do to ensure that can happen. And Professor Pandit earlier was talking about the UN SDGs and how they can't possibly be achieved without social enterprise. And I would totally agree. We align our own theory of change with those UN SDGs. And actually nurturing social enterprise is a key part of that work. So my thesis today is really around nurturing enterprise in our very local geography. A little bit of a sort of scoping slide. Really, and as you know, our grant making is in the region of 3 to 6 million, and actually that involves running between 30 and 40 different programs in any one year, and that's a lot of different programs. Some of those are donor driven, and some of those we have strategic flexibility or ability to flex according to the local challenges or opportunities. And so we're very keen to, I'm keen to stress today that we operate at that grassroots level. And therefore are very keen to develop social entrepreneurs enterprises and support them really to upscale to the next level, as other colleagues have already discussed this today. All of our grants programs are available for established and emerging CICs and CIOs. Sorry, this terminology might not be familiar with everybody, but in terms of their structure, and basically of the 339 unique organisations awarded grants in the year that we're looking at, a fifth were registered social enterprises. So it's not the complete picture of what we do, but it's a really important segment of our work. So we're just going to talk about a couple of things that we've done in a little bit more detail. The Ideas That Change Lives programme we've done in partnership with our local authority, Leeds City Council, and also with See Ahead, which is itself a social entrepreneur enterprise company. And so since 2014, we've invested over 600,000 into Leeds. That's been 95 grants, which have either been Kickstart grants of up to £5,000 or development grants, which are up to £15,000. And that's part of, again, what colleagues were saying earlier about the importance of being able to migrate individuals who've begun with a kickstart and some great enthusiasm and strong beginnings into a slightly more developed and transitional phase that allows them to grow on further. And I think that kind of recognition of the time that's required, the investment and faith that is required in working with those individuals or those small groups is key to this work, really important to keep that sort of keep holding hands basically as the ideas and the work develops. Just wanted to pick out one particular group that's really thrived with support through the Ideas That Change Life programme. The Wren Bakery has worked with marginalised women who've experienced the whole range of issues, addictions, prostitution, poor mental health, and actually with their grant they set up a bakery, and that bakery was and continues to be a safe and supportive space for those individuals, but it also provides that first step towards thinking about employment and thinking about having a purpose and a really meaningful involvement in society. Again, the story that really resonates for me is that one of the women who's attended and has become a very key mainstay of Wren Bakery. What triggered her approach was a dreadful attack of agoraphobia, and which then prompted an addiction problem and a whole set of as is very familiar in such circumstances, a sort of cascade of problems to do with loss of domestic security, loss of employment, etc. And it was only really through coming back she's only found her way back through coming back through the bakery, and never baked before, felt it was something of a strange idea, but actually life-changing for her, and the first step to feeling like she could live again. Hugely important for her personal journey, but actually making a real contribution to the bakery itself. The Solutions for an Ageing Society, this was a really interesting programme which allowed us to partner with some other organisations that are also doing great work in this area. Unlimited focuses very much on social enterprise and is working across a whole range of very exciting different scales of social enterprise and does amazing work. And Esme Fairbairn is a trust that has an interest in this area as well. So this was a very exciting opportunity for us to explore a number of different scenarios and explore particularly what it meant to support our aging population while harnessing the opportunity that presents, going back to Kieran's remarks about moving away from a deficit narrative to one of complete opportunity and growth. And it's been really amazing to work with such a range of different projects and programs. The Swan Song project here is actually a beautiful project, which is about therapeutic singing with people at the end of their lives, people facing their own end, wanting to share their thoughts and emotions with people that mattered to them through song. And that's actually been a great example of a what started off as a project, as you see here, has become something that's been supported not only by other funders, but is actually earning income, substantial income now, to the point that they're able to employ some staff, and that's wonderful, particularly during a time of pandemic and crisis, that actually not only have they been able to grow, but actually they've been able to apply their business as being so relevant at this particular time. Yeah, I think that's just a quote of how important it is. And then last example that I've got is around bibliotherapy, which is around the value of continued investment, even through different pots and funds. So this has been a bit of work that we've seen grow from one person to an organisation, and over the last 5 years, through different programs, we've been able to invest just under £35,000, about £7,000 per year, which have given the space and time and flex, if you like, to grow the vision, test, learn, build valuable relationships, and go from being a one-woman band to a registered company with good directors and trustees, not easy to find. And so it's been great to see that really grow and develop over the years. Thank you very much. I think I've run out of my slot, so I will stop sharing now if I can. There we go.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And the presentation is really inspiring, really, because you bring a new and fresh perspective, and you did that in 3 ways for me, which links from what we've been saying through the previous presentations. You highlighted the lived experience. We talk a lot about lived experience in the context of research that we do, but what you were able to do was to bring to life, the importance and the value of that. I really like the notion of what I've termed purposeful social enterprises, bringing the stories to life. We talked earlier on about role models, and inspiring young people with a different narrative, with a different set of stories. And then finally, what I was really inspired by was the way that your theory of change was building on, you lay the foundations, you have to put the faith, we talk a lot about values, both in terms of sustainability, but also about what we've learned, post-pandemic, and how value-driven organisations, whether they're social enterprises, SMEs, large corporations or educational institutions, are being governed by those sorts of principles. And I thought the foundations, having faith and then investing, and you talked about investment, which isn't always simply about money. It's about belief, it's about commitment, it's about support, and then that money is utilised and put, to good use, and giving people, hope. So, for me, I leave with a really strong, purposeful message about social enterprises in terms of, foundation, faith and investment. So thank you so much for that, because it really did shine a very different kind of lens to stories and the lived experience. Colleagues, I'm now going to invite you to start scribbling away in chat with future questions and reflections and comments. And then I'm also going to just introduce you to our next speaker, who's Dr. Jatinder Singh, who's the Director of the Chamber of Commerce and Industry in India. So a warm welcome, Jatinder. And I'm just checking that we have Jatinder that's just coming online. Rupinder, can I just check with you?
Kiran, Dr. Jatinder was there a while back. Maybe
Okay.
there is a...
We can always come back, can't we? He may have just kind of switched off for a bit. So rather than delay things, let me move on and we can come back to Dr. Jatinder. Would that make sense?
Yeah, we can do that, Kiran.
Yeah?
Yes.
Okay, let's do that, and I'll keep a lookout. Just sometimes, you know, people take a couple of minutes comfort break and just, you know, miss that kind of opportunity. So I will come back to that. Okay, well then, in which case, I'd like to move to David Barra, who's director and co-founder of We Can Access, and I love that title. So David, over to you.
I'm getting there. One sec.
Okay, no problem. Thank you.
It's all right. Which camera's working? Okay. What I'm going to do, because I'm going to build on what everybody else has done, but I'm going to share with you a slide that I was expecting to do in a few moments, and I better explain. Right. So, where am I? Can you see? No, you can't see those slides. That'd be hilarious. Can you see those or not? No.
Yeah, we can. Thank you.
Oh, you can see the slide. Okay, right. So I better explain the context, and I've sort of made notes. So bear with me. Right. What I did was my paid job, so to speak, is a university. I'm an academic at the University of East London, and I'm a senior lecturer in special needs. But actually, that's not why I'm here. Because the reason why I ended up there was in 2012, my daughter got a brain tumor. And essentially, my wife and I set up a social enterprise as an evolution, essentially, of our whole life journey. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a picture of my daughter about 5.5 years ago, and she was diagnosed with a malignant brain tumor. And as a result of medicine saving her life, she is visually impaired, hearing impaired, got a whole raft of issues. But that hit our family socially, economically, the whole lot whacked. And also we've got our own health issues. And essentially we were faced with a lot of problems. And we're fortunate that we were sufficiently able to weather the financial storm, not have to sell our house. But essentially there are fundamentally those problems of physical, social, economic problems that people face who have got health issues. Doesn't matter what creed, color, religion you are, there are all barriers. So ultimately, while our daughter survived, we faced literally every single day, barrier after barrier. I've spent 2 days in hospital just with visits this week alone. So what we did was we essentially, I tried the academic route of getting stuff academically published. And it was a very slow process in order to enable that change. That knowledge and that research is incredibly valuable, but in order to enable that social change that we as a family needed, we decided to go down a different route. So I ended up getting stuff published, getting stuff up to Parliament and to the Secretary of State of Communities, and still there was this laborious process of change if it was going to happen. So what my wife and I came up with was setting up a social enterprise. So what we've done is we've combined the research aspect of it, we've combined the practical business side of things, and we feel that actually social enterprises are in many ways the best model to create social change, because you can draw in that research, you can enable others and to build a community of change makers and enable people to have their voice. So essentially our mission, which I haven't told you what our mission is to enable people to physically access the world, physically, socially, economically, by providing an online platform where people with access needs and their carers and professionals share and discuss and trade. What we've done is we realize globally the issues are the same, irrespective of creed, color, or religion, and cultural backgrounds. So what we've done is we're trying to create a communal voice to enable people to learn from each other, to create change makers themselves. So what we've done is we've got on our site, we get people to blog, and we've got, bless his heart, we've got a 7-year-old who's a carer who's written what it was like to care for his mother under COVID-19. Now that enabled him to have a voice, yet other people to learn from him. And also we've got, for any of the academics out there, we get students to write up their dissertations as blogs if it's appropriate, and again have that knowledge exchange. And the whole purpose for us for the social entrepreneurship is, I say, it's amplifying people's voices and giving people an opportunity within the disability and accessibility and inclusion world to learn from each other. We currently running pilot projects in Nigeria, Cameroon, Mexico, England, and possibly a few other countries as well that are going to come on stream. And we just want to, essentially, we want to build a community of learners, and then enable other people to come up with ideas and facilitate their change at a local level. So that's me in short. That the current models and what other people were saying is the current models just simply don't work because they're too slow in responses to actual real social problems. I mean, essentially, we could, on a personal basis, I know people who have gone bankrupt in England alone because their children have got diagnosed with cancer. And if you look at people with health issues, globally, people are getting devastated. Economically, COVID-19 is going to, the repercussions of COVID-19 are going to consume so many resources that unless a different model gets taken in terms of accessibility and disability, a lot of people are going to lose out. And you're talking about 20% of the global population. So the social enterprise model is a far more dynamic model, and partly because of business. And sorry for talking so quickly, but that's what we're doing really to create that change. And we're linking up with partners everywhere else to support what they're doing and amplify their voices. If anybody's got any questions, I'd say that was what I was telling you about more than anything else. Sorry for that launch into one, really, and that shortness. Has anybody got any questions? Because I'm more used to Q&As rather than talking to people.
So just bear with us. There are a couple of kinds of questions, but I'm going to pick those up afterwards if that's okay. If that's okay with you.
It's for us. Sorry, it's for us. It's about changing the economics, because it's all very well going on about disability and labelling, but labelling comes at a cost, and it comes at a social, emotional, and it comes at a price. I mean, I read a paper that I think in Uganda there are 3 people nationally that can diagnose people with dyslexia. Well, you've got a lot more people. There are a lot of people who have difficulties in literacy, and if you've only got 3 people that can diagnose people with dyslexia, then how are you going to enable those environments? How are you going to empower those people to develop their literacy to then enable them economically? So that's why we're talking about there needs to be a shift economically and a shift in attitudes, and that's what the purpose behind what we're trying to do, which is shift those social attitudes through social change and enabling people's voices.
Thank you so much, David. Just so very powerful. You know, it's powerful for a whole range of reasons. You know, it's powerful because, you know, again, this area of lived experience, this area of inclusivity has almost been the golden thread in each of the presentations that we've had. But what I thought was really insightful and distinctive in terms of what you're saying is, it's about, you know, that economic conversation, you know, social enterprise. We've got to change this perception that social enterprises is simply about doing good, that it does not have an economics attached to it. And I think what your presentation has done has put almost the economics at the heart and back into that whole kind of debate, which is so critical and so important.
Just to build on that, you see, my wife and the co-founder was one of the first people to get into sustainability many years ago, And Emma worked in the field of development for years. And if you look at charities, they're built on having disposable income in order to fund those charities. And so therefore, if you, particularly in an economic, I mean, charities are really struggling now. If you don't have that excess money or time or that capacity to give to charities, how can you sustain that social development? How can you sustain those models? So I say the reason why we went down a social enterprise route is because they can be legitimately raise profit, but they're businesses for social good. So therefore you get the best of both worlds, and it's capacity building.
And that thing about capacity building is absolutely essential. And I want to come back to that because there's some really great questions coming up, you know, about making this kind of work visible. So at this point, can I just thank you and ask you to stop sharing the screen? And I want to move on to the next speaker and then come back to some of the points that you are raising. Colleagues, we've got two more speakers, which I'm really delighted to have because they both bring really fresh and interesting perspectives. I want to now go back to Dr. Jatinder Singh, who's the Director from the Chamber of Commerce and Industry in India. A warm welcome, Jatinder. No? Okay, well, I'm going to move on and hope Jatinder will be in a position to join us, you know, in due course. In which case, could I then please move to Prabhat Labha? Sorry, colleagues, I'm just getting a little bit of, could I ask everybody to mute if you haven't already done so, because otherwise it just causes, you know, some back noise for everybody. So if you could all mute if you haven't already done so. Great, thank you. So let's move on then. I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Prabhat Labha, who's the Chief Executive Officer from the Grameen Foundation in India. A really warm welcome and thank you for your patience.
Hello. Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can, thank you. That's great.
Microphone a little bit. So sorry, it took a while to fix that. So good afternoon, everyone. Delighted to be here on this panel. And first of all, congratulations to the three authors, Dr. Upinder Oberoi, Jamie, and Dr. Snowden for having authored this book. I think it's a really important contribution, to include this in the academic segment. I have been in this space of social development for my entire life, in fact, last 25 years. And I'm associated with Grameen Foundation India, which of course draws its inspiration from, again, the work of Professor Yunus that Suresh Krishna was talking about in his remarks in the beginning. And for us at Grameen Foundation, we are also about kind of, trying to solve some of the most protracted problems and challenges faced by low-income populations, especially women, and around issues of poverty and hunger. And Grameen Foundation itself, headquartered in the US, actually started off as a not-for-profit, as an NGO, like a typical NGO. And then over the course of our work in India, especially, we have now looked at, of course, we recognize the limitations of working as a non-profit. And hence, we actually felt the need to kind of, go for a structure which overcomes some of those limitations. And I'll be talking about some of those limitations, and which a social business structure actually helps you accomplish. And I'm very glad that, Suresh was talking about things like, working in social development or in social enterprise and that the need for that being looked at as an attractive career option. As we are working in social development, let's say in a non-profit format, what happens is that you are always funded by donor projects, donor grants, And projects have a start line and an end line. You get a project, you hire people, you start implementing, you train people, and then the project ends. You do not know what to do with your staff because you can't sustain them. You do not know how to sustain your impact because you don't have funds for that. And these, of course, NGOs by design are not designed for scale and are not designed for sustainability, even though nonprofits always talk about sustainability. So this format of social enterprise, in that sense, is a really great, movement, whereby it not only kind of addresses these fundamental aspects of how you create impact at scale, and how do you sustain that impact over long periods of time. We live in a world which is unfortunately growing more and more unequal. In last 1 year in post-COVID, we have learned a new alphabet about of economic recovery called K-shaped recovery. Earlier it was like V-shaped recovery and U-shaped recovery. Now it's a K-shaped recovery, which basically means that the world is actually moving in two different directions. There's one world which is kind of going up, going faster. Some people getting a lot more wealthier, and then a lot of people getting left behind and not even having what they had before. So in that kind of growing inequality and other challenges, growing malnutrition and health challenges and climate change challenges, I think it's an absolutely apt that we all talk very, very seriously about how social business as a concept can address some of these challenges of inequality. And like Suresh was mentioning about this book that Professor Yunus wrote, The World of 3 Zeros, in which he talks about social business as an approach to address the problems of growing unemployment, poverty, and climate change. For us at Grameen Foundation India, there was one important driver why we also choose this path to move from, say, an NGO to social business kind of approach, which was that overall at the social development sector, especially in the Indian context, and those of you who are familiar with the Indian context would acknowledge that, is a growing, declining space for the civil society NGOs, or civil society organizations, or NGOs. Many donors, bilateral and multilateral donors, have either reduced or completely stopped their funding in India. Government has also made it harder for non-profits to accept foreign funds through various regulatory measures. So that has been one trend of declining support for the NGO format of working. Then there's another trend which you can see, which is the government setting up its own parastatal organizations in the form of various livelihood missions and other things across both state and national governments, and basically trying to take over the space that actually belonged to non-profits, NGOs once. So you have declining funding, you have declining space, and as in a world where the challenges are only growing. But at the same time, we also saw an opportunity that there's a lot of space amongst the impact investment community to see that the investment which previously would be only just a normal venture capital investment, VC investment, they're trying to find a purpose for their investment. That while we making these investment, can we also solve a real problem faced by the world, faced in this world, whether it is a problem in the healthcare sector or in the education sector, or any issue of social relevance. So we have seen a lot of investment, a lot of excitement about impact investment, and that we saw as a kind of very natural progression, that things that we aim to do in terms of creating social impact in a not-for-profit format, how can we now do that in a social business format, so that we not only can solve the problems and create impact, we can create those impacts at much larger scale and a much larger sustainable manner, and which also of course addresses these very practical challenges of what do you do with staff, attracting and retaining staff over different kind of project cycles. So so one more thing which is absolutely critical, which is that in Grameen, One of the key things that we have been trying to do here, I talked about social businesses that we have created called Grameen Impact Ventures. And I'll just show us a screen here, share my screen for a moment. Just give me a moment. Yeah. I hope you're able to see my screen. Yeah. So this is a social business that we have created in Grameen called Grameen Impact Ventures, a social business to empower women as change makers at the last mile. And which, on the front page itself, you see that there are 4 SDG goals that we have identified: zero poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, and gender equality. And so all the work that we will do will be geared towards addressing these 4 SDGs. Now, this kind of slide shows you a visual of who are the kind of people for whom we are trying to create the impact. You can see a farmer plowing the fields in the rainy season somewhere in Bihar. You can see on the top left an artisan creating bamboo products, a kind of informal micro artisanal product. And then you have a small micro business, a small shop being run by another woman. If you think of these 3 different kinds of people: smallholder farmers, artisans, women, they face multiple challenges in life. Prone to life shocks, economic shocks, climate change, multiple barriers like barriers to awareness, appropriateness, access, affordability, trust, that they face in various things which prevent them from doing what they want to do. And normally, when an NGO would like to solve these challenges, then this will be only about the social challenge. Okay, how do you create convenient access? How do you move from things like financial inclusion to financial well-being? How do you address multiple adoption barriers? But then when you create this into a social business format, then you're also trying to figure out that there are some business challenges involved as well. How do you create a viable and scalable business model which can distribute socially relevant products and services to the last mile community and the kind of customers that I was just showing you? How do you address the demand and adoption constraints? How do you deliver value to a segment that is highly price and value conscious? And of course, viable business models for customer education, because it's not just about selling certain products or services, but also about educating customers and empowering them. So I think, as social business, if we are able to address these twin challenges of the social challenge and the business challenge, that's when one can have a sustainable social business. It's not easy because, most businesses are struggling just to address the business challenge. And as a result, you'll find that, customers in the remote rural areas are the ones who are, the most disadvantaged, because businesses will find it unprofitable to serve those customers, and so they'll just leave them out. So this whole principle of inclusion, that the concept that we will not leave anyone behind, but we'll do everything that is necessary to serve the most disadvantaged and most excluded customers, is as a business principle of social businesses comes to the fore. And we don't try to do that by saying that, okay, it's unviable to serve those remote rural customers and hence, subsidize it. But actually by going the path of innovation, that is there a method to, serve them, those customers, which remains viable, which can be served. So I think, the social business also have to look at that full aspect of innovation, because they're, trying to address, very complex challenges, the social challenges and the business challenges. It's not just a kind of, a format to do, run a business with the social mission, because running a business itself is complex enough. And then trying to say that, I will run a sustainable business and I will also address protracted social challenges. So I think, yeah, it's complex. It's not easy. but it's doable, as so many successful social businesses are showing us day in and day out. And that says, including this kind of book and including this in the curriculum of higher education in the universities is actually very, very crucial. And I congratulate all the authors for having taken this effort to write this book, and for all the speakers for having spoken so passionately about various things that they are working on. So I'll pause here, and thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you. If you could just stop sharing screen again, that would be great. Thank you. And again, what an insightful presentation. And what I really liked was the way that you brought in, a part of the community that often gets neglected, which is our rural communities. And the rural communities in the UK have sustained our cities and regions for more years than we can remember, within that. But the two things that I thought was just so interesting about your presentation was about this notion of purposeful innovation, innovation and change, and the real excitement behind sort of enterprises, and then creating those inclusive cultures. But you also added what I think is a really important dimension, which is about the social and the business. What is good business? What's socially responsible business? And often we present them as paradoxes or dichotomies, that they sit on either end of the scale. And what you've shown us in your presentation is that actually one is intrinsically linked to the other, but it has to be part of your setting up and the values. And I really like the slide where you highlighted, we don't often talk about, micro enterprises. And micro enterprises, they start small. They might only be 1 or 2 people, but it's 1 or 2 people who are helping, alleviate, whether it's the poverty gap, whether it's the inclusivity gap, whether it's around gender equality. And I thought that was really helpful. Micro businesses don't get enough voice or your insight, and yet they again quietly contribute economically and socially, to the communities they serve. So thank you so much for that. Colleagues, thank you. The questions are coming in and the reflections are coming in thick and fast. So we're going to have a really great panel debate. But before we do that, I'm delighted to welcome our final speaker of the morning or evening, depending on which part of the world you're in. And that is Dr. Jatinder Singh, who's the Director of the Chamber of Commerce and Industry in India. A really welcome to you, Jatinder. I'll hand it over to you. You've got about 8 to 10 minutes maximum, in terms of to share your thoughts and reflections, and then we will move into the panel debate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm thankful to Sharon and Dr. Upinder Oberoi for inviting me to this panel discussion and book launch on social enterprise and higher education sector. Indeed, a very, very important topic, and education per se is nothing but it's a social enterprise. Although we say education is not for profit, but social entrepreneur is basically making a blend of that sustainable surplus in order to improve the educational infrastructure, education ecosystem within their own geographies and territories, and at the same time they are delivering the best thing that ought to be delivered, that is educating the masses. And as we know that social innovators and social entrepreneurs, they have been working to solve market failures, and they have demonstrated more sustainable models to build inclusive economies for many, many years. And over the past decades, what we have seen, particularly from industry perspective, that a sophisticated impact ecosystem has emerged to support the work of social innovators and also impact enterprises. For example, this includes like funding, which is provided by capital sources that range from philanthropy and impact investment. Then there are a lot of intermediaries providing certification and standards. Then there are peer networks of learning. And also there are a lot of policy and regulation of this new social economy, which is seeking to embed inclusive as well as sustainable organizational approaches, which are actually imbued with the principles of equality, justice, and respect for our planet. Because when we talk of this triple bottom line, people, planet, and profit, in fact, for profit or not for profit is not a sort of a judicious thing that can actually bring this equality, it's basically the blend between for-profit and not-for-profit, that is the social entrepreneurship, that will actually, solve the problems, the issues and challenges that we are right now, we are passing through. And in fact, the challenges and opportunities, they go hand in hand. For example, many of the problems of the education sector can be addressed by the social entrepreneurs, and they have a lot of opportunities, a lot of needs and gaps they need to be filled. For example, now there is a shift from traditional learning methods to e-learning that is creating many new opportunities for social entrepreneurs. And a lot of gaps are being filled by the social entrepreneurs, as we can see in terms of access, learning methods and tools. The blended education that we are seeing right now, the hybrid, the online and offline mode, in fact more of online, has actually given a new leash of life for the social entrepreneurs to do research and development in order to even cover the last mile students. That's the best thing this in fact pandemic has brought in the garb of something blessing in disguise. So because many social entrepreneurs, they are adopting some of the unconventional learning methods comfortably in order to educate each and everybody in this chain. And because many of the social entrepreneurs, they are bringing many micro innovations in the classroom by offering students some unconventional teaching materials, methodologies, and also innovative ways of teaching. See, most of us, we have heard about corporate social responsibility programs. For example, in India already there's an act which tells about it has actually given a legal eye for CSR spend. And we have seen that building a whole company around social impact is a relatively new concept that's taking place at a very fast pace in our country. And it is also fitting in with the direction that the future of work seems to be taking. For example, the millennials and the Generation Act, as we are seeing that they want to make an impact through the work they do. Gone are the days like cushion jobs or 9-to-5 jobs. Most of the our millennials and Gen Z, they are definitely looking for some of those opportunity wherein they can make an impact. So this social impact organization, which is formed by the social entrepreneurs, whether they run for profit or as a non-profit, it actually reframes the metrics around how success is measured. For example, if a social impact organization runs as a profit-making company, the profit margin is a metric. But the main metric is whether the company achieves its aims of impacting the social, cultural, or environmental issues. So this is the thing that many of us are saying interest in. And many companies now have a strong sense of mission, and there is also a business case linked to this in order to make that sustainable thing going on. And many of them are actually making excellent business sense to build a company around these social issues. And as long as these issues continue to exist, definitely there will be sustainable business models, and also there will be a revenue. And as we have seen that a strong purpose and a mission, these are some of the biggest motivators that actually we can have for the leaders and a team for any business. For example, I was going through a report, 2018 Deloitte Millennial Survey, and 40% of the respondents, they believed that the goal of businesses should be to improve society. It's a big change we are seeing. And 2 years later, barely half of the millennials, they felt that business was a force only for good. So this actually, showcase that millennials are more likely to be interested in local activities, and the most effective initiatives, they are those that are related to companies' core business. So impact investment, that's gaining a lot of momentum. It's growing at a rapid pace. Now investors, they want to generate environmental, social, positive impact in addition to the financial returns. Because now you can see, like, for example, in India, there's a mandate that every company, they have to file the annual business responsibility reporting, wherein they are every aspect of how they are actually impacting the people, the planet, and the profit is basically the last thing that this reports basically tells about. So SEBI has mandated this business responsibility reporting, which is also a type of sustainability reporting for the top 1,000 listed companies, and that's going to increase in number in few months to come. So again, this is a very, very active step. So what we are seeing now, there are a lot of business trends. We are seeing that there's a lot of movement happening towards more ethically conscious businesses, and the leaders whose primary purpose is to serve and also to add value and create impact in the world. This is a change that we are seeing in the next generation, particularly in family businesses. In Chamber, we encounter a lot of family businesses, and we are definitely seeing this positive change. And also, it's a time for companies. They have to understand that doing good for society actually makes business sense. So social entrepreneurs, they are not only a sort of a social safety net for our systemic innovation failures, but they also represent a new yardstick for the leaders in this 21st century, which is nothing but system change leaders. And these leaders do not try to fill every gap and serve every need, but instead they are implement forces. They enable whole groups of society to become agents of their own change, navigate the complex arrangements of institutions of power in a rapidly changing business environment. And in doing so, they actually shift the rapid structures that actually entrench in equality. So while this pandemic is taking a toll on the vulnerable communities around the world, but companies that are having a social focus are actually encouraging some of the traditional businesses to have a rethink. And we have seen them tackling some of the perennial challenges ranging from like access to healthcare, access to education, like even remote working, and economic resilience is all the way to transparency, even to the extent of fighting fake news. So what I think that the world right now needs dynamic social entrepreneurs right now who are like hyper practical. They are the disruptive leaders, the transformational leaders who discard traditional practices to tackle these gigantic social problems. So COVID-19 is definitely a holistic emergency, just like a climate change or gender inequality or maybe like racial injustice. But whole range of other systemic issues that expose the cracks throughout the foundations of modern society, it needs to be thought over. And the impact, definitely, it will go well beyond health to unemployment, even to the extent of food insecurity, even to solving some of the economic disparities, even like to surmount the challenges of inadequate education systems and much more. So right now we stand at the nexus of multiple colliding crises. That thus we need to invest in more converging solutions, and who better to find and implement those solutions than social entrepreneurs. So I congratulate the team for coming out with this very important book. It is in fact very aptly timed. I am sure that the learnings from this book will definitely unleash the hidden potential. It will change the mindset of somehow business entrepreneurs, that it is basically the social entrepreneurship model that will actually impact a change in this modern society. So thank you very much. Thank you for giving me this opportunity for this very, very important and pertinent brainstorming session. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Singh. What a great note to conclude the various presentations on. So in some ways, I'm so glad that you were the final presentation, because what you highlighted, and it has parallels to my own research, is we have to move away from just making the social case for social enterprises. There is a very strong business case and a very strong business model, which you've articulated. But the other thing which I thought was really insightful and new and distinctive about your presentation is the role of future leaders. What kinds of leaders are we producing, for the future? And that whole innovation, you use the term micro innovation, which I think is really powerful. Systemic leaders, leaders who have the responsibility and are the agents of their own change. And actually, young people are demanding that. They're demanding that from their educational institutions. They're demanding that from the kind of workplaces they choose to work in. So I think you have also struck a really strong chord about the way people lead in the future. And, you know, social entrepreneurs are great business leaders. You know, they bring that social mission and that social value, but they also do good, responsible business. And that's the note that I want to conclude on. So thank you so much for your really powerful and challenging insights about how we begin to shape and learn from COVID-19 in terms of our education systems. You know, you talked about the blended model, you know, and how it's actually uncovered new and unconventional ways of learning, but it's also maybe opened up access to education in places that it wouldn't have been so readily be available to. And so there is something about education and the design of education in the future in terms of inspiring, you know, the next generation of responsible leaders. And then finally, we haven't talked a lot today about, but it's so important, about success measurements, which are not just about social, culture and environment, but they're also about business, how that money, you know, is made in order to make the difference socially, culturally and environmentally. So thank you so much. Colleagues, we have about 10 to 15 minutes, you know, to open up questions, reflections for the panel. And the one that I want to start off with, because it's such a pertinent one and it's come out in a number of the reflections that you've put in the chat, in the kinds of questions that you're asking. Each of the presentations and the book has made a really strong and compelling case for social enterprises. So if they are so effective, and we've seen that from the concrete examples that everybody has presented, how do we make sure they are more visible? They're more visible in the context of our education sector, they're more visible in the world of business, and they're more visible in the world of policymakers. So let me start, you know, in terms of, Kate, I'm going to come to you because I thought, you know, you helped highlight the impact of that. So maybe if I come to you first in a couple of sentences, you know, how do we make this more visible? And then I'm going to come to some of our education colleagues.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I guess I shared a little bit of my frustration in my note in the chat, in that it feels like even though I have been able to join those on the tables of power and be part of the local enterprise partnership, that there is such an education piece needed for people's best understanding of what communities do and how you know, the inclusion piece that you quite rightly stress, and how social enterprise all play in to that outcome. So I guess where I was coming from was the frustration that it feels as though the words are being used and the language is being commandeered, if you like, but actually in terms of the practicality, I think there's something that's incumbent on us who care about this to demonstrate how it can be made practical. And that's the bit, I think, where the education sector is potentially a fantastic ally in helping us demonstrate pilots and good practice and summoning the data and the evidence of where this works well, and really just putting together a piece of celebratory PR, frankly, to raise the profile. I think that's where I'd love to see us go, and clearly the book is a great tool in that regard.
You're absolutely right, and maybe building on that, we have to kind of think about you know, our policymakers, you know, our APG committees. The APG committees, for colleagues that are with us internationally, are committees that happen in terms of government and parliament. You know, we have one for family business, you know, we have one for SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises. How do we make the contribution. I've just finished a really big piece of research on the contributions that family businesses make to sustainability, you know, which isn't about, you know, simply about money. It's about how they sustain their communities, but they do it quietly. Nobody knows about it. And yet, you know, the amount it saves the NHS in terms of mental health is just huge. So, you know, that's really helpful. Mark, I know you weren't on the panel, but you've put some really insightful comments, you know, and have been engaging really strongly in that. Can I come to you, you know, on the basis of the same question? And, you know, for that to happen, the education sector also has to work, you know, much more closely with these different kinds of agencies. Your reflections, you know, in terms of visibility.
I'm with Kate on this in that, you know, there is a PR piece, and I think it's about recognizing that universities are full of agency, full of people, full of values as well. But it's a case of internal leadership grasping the nettle to actually mobilize that agency for students to take the skills, their knowledge, their values, their attitudes, etc., out into social enterprise environments, but tie that in and legitimize it within curriculum to things like assessment, so that it's purposeful and it's a win for the university and the students, but also articulate that in terms of them then being really able to exemplify the rhetoric even of kind of social agency, social cultural capital. I mean, most universities talk about these things, but, you know, it's about how do we deliver on those? And I think there's more work to be done. But I think yeah, visibility will only come from action and lots of cases that can be then surfaced as examples. You know, how many social enterprises have intimate relationships with university business schools, for example, marketing, PR, accounting, finance, etc. And I just think these are underexploited in a way which is ethical.
No, thank you. That's really helpful. I want to keep on that theme, but Professor Pandit, I want to come to you next, because education and educators have a really strong role to play, and Dr. Michael Snowdon, you know, in the chat has highlighted, you know, the responsibility that we have as educators to ensure that it's encompassed within, you know, our curriculum and in the design of learning. So I wondered whether you had some thoughts in the context of the work that you have been doing about how we embed this, you know, much more integratively in the context of our curriculum, and not just for students who are in business or management schools, but across the university. And Prabhat, I'm going to come to you after that, because, you know, you're doing it on the ground and you talk so passionately about those kinds of future leaders. So any further comments or reflections, Professor Pandit? Professor Pandit, just wanting to double check if you're still with us. Okay, I'll come back to that. Prabhat, if I could come to you.
Yeah, so as you talk about, nurturing talent for managing these social businesses and taking on these challenges, and of course, I was talking about the complex challenges, right? So, when, let's say, I was starting, my career in a non-profit world, nobody, in my family or in my immediate neighborhood knew about what even NGO is, and leave aside, things like career in an NGO, and so, of course, jobs, for young people in this sector will become aspirational if the visibility of the enterprises, social businesses, is much more, right? And for that visibility, of course, the enterprises, have to be around for some time. They have to operate at a certain scale, and then they have to do a very important thing, which is that not only work on impact, but also educate the rest of the world about your work and about your impact. We often are very reticent about talking about our achievements or about our work or our impact,
we believe that our work will speak for itself, but it doesn't. It doesn't reach all corners of the world. Enough people will not know about it unless you kind of actively work about communicating about your work and about your impact. Because so I think for the people working in social business, it's equally important to not only put all the hard work and sweat and blood that they put into creating that impact, but it's equally their duty perhaps to educate the world about that, because then that'll create awareness, then that'll create other that'll attract other people to come and embrace a kind of a career in that segment. So I think that's and for that I actually am very enthused by the interest in the universities these days. A number of universities have launched courses in, say, social business, social enterprise. Young people come to me and lots of other people all the time as to, okay, how can I make a beginning, how a career in the sector might look like. So absolutely, I think it's a good time to be making all of these efforts to attract young people into social business sector, and of course to make sure that we all work hard to make social businesses more and more successful, so that we can attract more talent to the space.
Great, thank you so much. I'm going to just come to the panelists now, because we are running out of time, and I want to hand it back both to Sharon and Rupinder to do the close. But before I do that, for the panelists that are still online, I just wonder if you might, as a final sentence or a final reflection, what's the takeaway in relation to today for you? What might we learn to just push those boundaries just slightly further? And I'm a great believer that if you ask others to do it yourself. And so I think for me, I'm going to take away this really important message about leadership, leaders of social enterprises, and how they lead, and what we might learn from that, and embed that in the context of both our education systems, but also in the context of large businesses. Kate, let me come to you, then I'll come to Jatinder Singh if he's still online, and then finally to my final two panelists that are still there, and then I'll hand it back. So just in a sentence or so, because I'm really conscious of time and I want to make sure Rupinder has an opportunity to do the final close.
Thanks, Kieran. So my takeaway is I'm really enthused by the general messages that I'm hearing about the level of interest, the level of focus. And so my takeaway will be to work harder to build partnerships so that the work that we've been nurturing and looking after gets a chance to be platformed elsewhere and gets noticed elsewhere. So that's going to be my job, is to try and make sure that it's known about and shared more broadly. And I guess also just to reflect back on the point about PR and visibility, and just to sort of take comfort that I'm not a lone voice, and I will, keep banging the drum, if you like, and do what I can to capitalize on other people's work, stand on shoulders, etc., to make more of an impact in any of the forums that I'm able to, so that there is a bit more notice paid to the work that we're all so keen to promote.
Great, thank you so much. Prabhat, come to you. Oh, sorry, Dr. That's right.
Thank you. So my only a single line takeaway is that the social entrepreneurs are definitely going to play a key role in shaping the post-pandemic world, particularly in the education space. And for this, the technology is going to be a key driver in accelerating the pace of the systemic change. So technology is definitely the fountainhead for anything we want to change our the planet in terms of positive impact and also positive outcomes in terms of surmounting the challenge that we are facing in this pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Prabhat, if I come to you next.
So just one thing to add to, in fact, what Dr. Jatinder said, that of course technology, will play a very, very critical role in anything that happens in the world in future. But also that, especially for social businesses, when we look at the people whom we want to serve, we have to look at them not just as our target group or impact group, but also as an important part of stakeholder. We often underestimate the power of what people themselves can do for themselves. So as social businesses, if we can create opportunities for deeper engagement of our communities in our work itself, I think that that can create a multiplier effect. That can create more engagement and more visibility. It will also kind of create a greater goodwill and authenticity for our work. So I think that is crucial. Yeah, and of course, in a post-pandemic world, social business, and not just post-pandemic, but also in a post-liberalization and post-globalization kind of economy, social businesses have a much bigger role to play, so that the world becomes a more equal and more just kind of place. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And then the final words to Suresh.
Yeah, I'm here.
Thank you.
Thanks. I was just listening. So I think for me, the key takeaway is I'm really encouraged with the kind of interest coming into the social enterprise space and the social business space, and to look at sustainable social business models today. I mean, I wish I had this opportunity when I was younger, when I started my career, but I think nevertheless, I'm quite happy to see that at least the next generation will have a better opportunity now. More and more universities, I'm saying, are coming out with social business or social enterprise courses, and there are funds being created. And there is a visibility today about the importance of social enterprise sector. Like many of my other colleagues here talked about the future post-COVID or the post, the new era which we are going to see now. I think social enterprises would be an important game changers in the way the human beings are going to lead in the future. So I think social enterprises are here to stay, and we will see more and more people getting into that once the university starts picking up. Then I think the work which so many years the social entrepreneurs have been doing will start inspiring more and more students. So more people coming into the space, good for the society. So that's what I think about.
Great, thank you so much. Colleagues, thank you for your thoughtful engagement, for your reflection and your great questions. And on that note, I'm going to hand it back now to Rupinder, both the convener and one of the authors of the book. Rupinder.
Thank you very much, everybody, both from UK and from India. So grateful to all for joining us today, this afternoon and this evening here in India. Dr. Mike Snowdon is here with me. He's there as one of the participants. He's my co-editor for the book. And Dr. Jamie Halsall, unfortunately, could not join us today because he's not feeling well since yesterday. But what an enriching, exciting, insightful, and thought-provoking and very deep discussion and dialogue on this, what I call a very pertinent topic and subject of social enterprise and how do we locate it within the higher education sector. So many interesting points, issues, and concerns were mentioned today by all the subject domains, both from the industry, practitioners, and also from the academicians. And very interesting case studies, examples were talked about while this discussion was going on. Professor Kiran Tran, you mentioned about the champions, the exemplars, the leaders as a catalyst of change, and I definitely agree to that. I absolutely believe that we need those, you need to showcase this change makers, and the student community needs to get enthused with this idea that you can actually create this blended space of profitability and social relevance. I think that is what has been missing so much in this top brass business schools. The management schools have sort of made this a wonderful case of profit seeking, but they have in their dialogue to the students forgot to tell about the relevance of inclusivity, the relevance of being very diverse. And these are some of the things which are being brought back into the lexicon, language, and the grammar of teaching itself. And I wish the management school, top brass management school, underscore and create this ethos of learning among the students. And this is what perhaps this book seeks to engage in. We entered into this project in 2017. And in the journey of doing this research, both in Delhi University and some of the universities, particularly in University of Huddersfield, and I did visit a number of other universities in UK, I found that this is a fertile zone, which can actually be showcased to the students. And I believe that there is this gradual, relentless paradigm shift which is emerging, and the so-called hybrid organization are going to gain more acceptability and relevance in the times to come. The blended value creation, the amalgamation of what we call the social, economic, the triple P, environmental concerns are arenas where global and national policy designers, think tanks have to have their eye on. And as mentioned by the panelists, the pandemic has only accelerated this concern. So, I'm really grateful to Dr. Jamie and Dr. Mike Snowden, who actually not only helped me with this research in India, but also we went ahead and was successful in launching courses on social innovation and social enterprise at University of Delhi. And Mr. Prabhat Lab is here with us, and Professor Unnit Pandit is here, and both of them were invited and they did interact with the students of Delhi University. I wrote a recent piece in which I talked about the capitalism reset. And I think when we situate and talk about social enterprise, it is high time that we start talking about this new neoliberal agenda where capitalism perhaps needs to reset itself and be more inclusive, diverse, and more synchronized with the sustainable development goals rather than doing corporate social responsibility, often talked about as greenwash, PR, and branding, etc. So thank you one and all for not only sparing time today, but also giving us further idea and brainstorming into this very critical area, which I believe is going to gain more focus, more highlight by the policymakers, by the government, and also the civil society organization in the future to come. Thank you all, and have a good day. And over to you, Kiran, for your last words.
No, thank you, colleagues. A huge congratulations to the authors of the book, to our keynote speakers for their thoughtfulness and their challenges and their provocations, and also to the audience for your thoughtful and engaging questions. There is so much work for us still to do. Today was about a celebration of the work that we have done, and I hope now it's also helped us think about future agendas, policy, practice and business work together to create meaningful and effective change so that social enterprise becomes everybody's business. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Kiran. Thank you, Sharon.
Take care. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Everybody. Bye-bye. Thank you very much.